You know, if you ask pretty much anyone who knows about Hindu scriptures how many Vedas there are, they're almost always going to say four, right? But what if I told you that for centuries, some of the most ancient and important texts only mention three? Okay, let's dive into this, because it's a really fascinating historical puzzle.
So, right off the bat, this is the big question. We all know the list of four Vedas, but then you have these constant references in ancient literature to something called the Veda Trayi, which literally means the triad, or a group of three. And look, this isn't some minor typo, it's a genuine contradiction that has had scholars scratching their heads for a long, long time.
So, what's the deal? Which is it? Was the fourth Veda, the Atharvaveda, just a later addition that got tacked on? Or is there something much more subtle going on here? This is the heart of the debate, and to really get to the bottom of it, we have to go straight to the source texts themselves. And this is where the plot thickens. When you actually look at the texts, they seem to argue with each other. On one hand, you have incredibly important scriptures talking about Triad Vidya, the triple knowledge, which really seems to lock the number at three. But then you have other sources that are just as old and just as authoritative, like the Mundaka Upanishad, that straight up list all four. It's a real scriptural puzzle. Well, it turns out the solution isn't about simply counting books on a shelf. The real key, the thing that unlocks this entire mystery, lies in understanding the function of each Veda within the most important ceremony of the Vedic world, the Yajna, or the fire ritual. Okay, so let's break down how a Yajna works. Think of it like a highly complex, sacred performance that needs four specialists, four priests. You've got the Hota, who recites hymns from the Rig Veda to call upon the deities. Then there's the Udgata, who sings beautiful chants from the Samaveda. The Adzaryu is the one who handles all the physical actions, using formulas from the Yajurveda. And then you have the fourth priest, the Brahma. Their job is totally different and absolutely crucial. They're the supervisor, the chief priest who oversees the entire thing. And the Veda they use? You guessed it, the Atharvaveda. See, the Brahma priest isn't chanting or singing out loud like the other three. Their job is to watch over the whole ritual, and using the deep knowledge from the Atharvaveda, they mentally correct any little mistake or slip-up made by the others. They're the silent guardian making sure the ceremony is absolutely perfect. And right there, in that very specific, silent, supervisory role, that is the key that unlocks the whole meaning of Trayi. This is the aha moment. So here it is. Veda Trayi was never supposed to be a head count of the Vedas. It wasn't about counting three books. It was a functional description. It refers to the three types of mantras that are actively performed, the ones that are spoken, sung, and physically enacted during the Yajna. It's all about action and sound. And this isn't just some modern theory. The source texts themselves confirm it. They explain that this whole 3 versus 4 problem just disappears once you realize Trayi is all about the context of the Yajna. The first 3 Vedas provide the stuff you hear, the spoken words and the songs. And that's what forms the active, audible triad of the ceremony. And because the Brahma priest's job is to supervise, and they're mostly silent, their Veda, the Atharvaveda, is functionally separate from that audible group of 3. Now, this doesn't make it less important. No way. You could argue it's the most important, since it's guiding the whole show. But because it's not performed in the same way, it just wasn't included in that functional term, Trayi. Mystery solved. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, that's a neat explanation, but maybe the Atharvaveda really is just a newer text that they tried to fit in later. That's a fair question, but there's some pretty powerful evidence that says otherwise. The source material points us to the work of Panini. Now, Panini was an absolute genius, one of the greatest linguists in all of human history, and he lived way back around the 5th century BCE. And in his writings, he clearly mentions the Atharvaveda and the people who studied it. This is rock-solid proof that the Atharvaveda was already an ancient, established, and respected text thousands of years ago. This brings us to another huge misconception about the Atharvaveda. What's actually in it? For a long, long time, it's gotten a really unfair reputation, and it's been pretty much dismissed. Yeah, this is the stereotype you always hear, right? It was pushed a lot by early Western scholars. The idea was that the first 3 Vedas were full of high-minded philosophy, while the Atharvaveda was just some collection of folk magic and superstitious spells. But is that even remotely true? Absolutely not. When you actually dive into what the Atharvaveda contains, it is a mind-blowing encyclopedia of knowledge. Seriously, it's got the foundational principles of Ayurveda, the traditional Indian system of medicine. It talks about how to run a government. It has detailed knowledge of botany and the natural sciences. It covers complex philosophy. It even gets into the science of weaponry. This is a Veda that's deeply focused on how to live life here on Earth, how to be healthy, prosperous, and create a good society. So you see, what got dismissed as magic were actually incredibly sophisticated practices and rituals. They were designed to work with natural principles to improve people's physical and spiritual well-being. It's really a science of living, just framed in the language of its time. To call it witchcraft is to completely miss the point of its depth and its purpose. So let's just put it plainly. The Atharvaveda is not some weird outlier or a late addition to the party. It is the fourth, absolutely essential pillar of Vedic knowledge. It provides the practical, worldly wisdom that perfectly complements the ritual and philosophical knowledge of the other three. And all of this leaves us with a final, bigger thought. The story of the Atharvaveda, how it was misunderstood and then finally clarified, it kind of raises a question for all of us, doesn't it? How often do we just label something as wrong or primitive simply because we don't understand it or it doesn't fit into our neat little modern boxes? Maybe the real mystery was never in the ancient texts, but in our own willingness to look past the stereotypes and actually try to understand.